completely unchecked. It was a derogatory phrase used to describe humans. Its literal meaning referred to how humans hid their teeth behind closed lips when they smiled while interacting with other races, since most found the baring of teeth to be a sign of aggression, or in extreme cases, even a threat. They did this to be polite, and at first it was generally appreciated by those they met, and this politeness eventually extended towards most interspecies interactions, from social to political. The humans were very considerate of the other cultures and ways of life, a stark contrast to what they knew of humanity's history. They had expected a fierce race, thirsty for conflict and blood, and to be fair, when they first took to the stars, their exploratory vessels had military escorts. But times had changed and the humans continuously scaled back their military presence. They would never abandon it entirely, of course, but the size of their standing forces could usually be measured by what it would take to defend their current territory. And if there was excess, it would be repurposed. Over time, the galaxy fell into a misconception that humanity had defanged itself upon joining true civilization. This mistaken opinion went unchallenged by the human ambassador when their fellow Federation members subtly probed for their take on the matter, as from a small bit of dismissive laughter. Nearly a century later, and the phrase had now reached peak usage, and though it was usually not said directly to a human's face, its second meaning was clear. They took the humans for cowards, a race that chose the paths of least resistance in conflict and argument and avoided war at all costs. The galaxy saw them as a race who, if they had any courage before, they had surely lost it by now. So when the Atrioc, a warmongering empire from another galaxy, invaded with enough forces to threaten the galaxy at large, no one expected much from the humans. Their technological advances were amazing, to the point of disbelief at times, and their individuals were impressive on their own. But clearly they weren't built to handle war. Not anymore. So when humanity volunteered itself as the galaxy's vanguard, to hold the line until the other races could muster the full might of their forces, it took everyone off guard. But what truly shocked them to their core was how quickly the humans overturned every misconception they previously held. Some races had never even heard of a war economy before. After all, most of them balanced their economies with both consumer and military needs in mind, so there was never a need to alter the systems already in place. But they now watched as luxury cruiser production lines now pumped out battle cruisers, how hundreds of personal spacecraft businesses now churned out hordes of fighters. Any form of consumer production that was not absolutely required shifted to provide for the war effort, from batteries and fuel for energy weapons to ammunition for kinetic arms. They watched as humanity pulled back their lips and revealed their hidden teeth. The main routes between systems now swarmed with the might of humanity's military, a plague of heavily armed locusts that picked up more and more members with each human system it passed through before making its way past their allies' planets. Sensors screamed out warnings and alerts to the owners of these worlds as thousands upon thousands of ships roared past daily. And even after the bulk of the fleet had gone by, hundreds of reinforcements came through in its wake as soon as they came off their respective production lines, with crews ready to man them on standby for the moment they were battle-ready. Their allies weren't the only ones caught by surprise by humanity's decisiveness. Having sent spies to scout out this new galaxy they planned to conquer, the Atioch found themselves under the same mistaken impression, and were fully unprepared for the immediate and violent response, as a massive wave of enemy vessels dropped out of FTL and crashed against their forces. From the outset, the invaders found themselves on the defensive, with the human forces driving them almost back to the edge of the galaxy through sheer ferocity. The human fleet was made up of primarily medium to small spacecraft, so while they wouldn't be able to strike any serious blows to the Atrioc fleet, they had far more mobility and would be able to bleed their opponents of strength. From the start, the goal was not victory, but simply to stall, to hold the line until the heavy cruisers and destroyers of the Federation could be mustered and arrive en masse. Even when the true firepower of the Federation fleet finally arrived, the enemy couldn't completely ignore the swarm in favor of the larger threats because the human fighters were dogged in their efforts to bring down communications towers and shield generators, and being blind, deaf, and naked in front of the heavy neutron cannons of the destroyers was nothing short of a death sentence. Eventually, the Atrioc managed to destroy one of the heavy Federation vessels, but they couldn't celebrate because humanity had made them pay dearly for it, crippling the communications of two of their own, and severely weakening the integrity of another's shields. They did their best to make a comeback, and the losses on the Federation's side were not small. But ever since the initial assault, the invaders hadn't been able to gain a steady foothold in this battle. Finally, when only about half their original fleet remained, they accepted the futility of this invasion and jumped out the largest and most important vessels, leaving behind others as sacrifices so they could escape. Humanity was relentless in their pursuit of the stragglers, hunting them all along the galaxy's edge until they were certain none remained. Even then, though, humanity didn't pull back its forces like the rest. For the next several years, the Great Swarm patrolled the galaxy's border, waiting to see if the Atrioc wanted to try their luck again. During this time, there was discontent amongst the other races that such a force was traveling the galaxy completely unchecked, but none were brave enough to confront the humans. The race they had labeled toothless cowards had bared their deadly fangs at the enemy, and they were nearly as terrified as their foes had been. Aside from a lack of courage that prevented them from voicing their concerns, there was a sense of shame that they had severely underestimated and disrespected such a fierce ally. Humanity had been the first ones in, and while everyone else had already gone back, they still hadn't pulled out. They prowled the edge in force like a pack of wolves, their muzzles still freshly bloodied from their last kill, daring anyone who had the courage to try to take them on a second time. 5 years to the day since humanity clashed with the invaders, they finally pulled back their forces to the heart of human space. The productions lines had slowly been transitioning back towards consumer goods for some time now. But now the vessels of war had returned to the very lines on which they were built to be dismantled and have their materials repurposed. Another year passed and humanity had returned to its pre-war state, and aside from the monuments erected to honor those who had lost their lives in the conflict, one could be forgiven for thinking that the fury and violence displayed by the humans had been nothing more than a collective dream. But the galaxy would never make that mistake again. They had now experienced what it was like to fight alongside these terrifying humans, and they never wanted to see what it was like to go against them. So they silently thanked their gods that the humans choose not to bare their fangs at them, to abandon the brutality they now saw came so easily to them, to choose peace instead of war, to smile with lips without teeth. It was a derogatory phrase used to describe humans.